So good afternoon, Brian, and we are here again on our Google Classroom in that site 22, which is agricultural biology. So last time we discussed about the course outline and grading system. So a video that you can always go check on to, and for those who cannot be on the meeting, like now, ikaw na naman mag-isa. So just let me know if you are not be you will not be available kasi every time I can record a video pero mas okay naman kung may attendee like you, no? So our first chapter with unit 1, which is introduction, we're going to talk about the introduction to biology. So it's just an introduction to the study of what is biology.
Question, ma'am.
Oo, what is biology again?
Study of life.
Yes, it's the study of life. So this, by the way, this presentation are taken from the online sources. So, andun yun sa inyong course outline. So, it's the study of living things. This is just a review or introduction of your previous biology subjects or science subjects. So, did you have a biology subject before?
Sa kuan, ma'am, sa forestry. Kalimutan ko.
So, review na lang ni siya. But then, you cannot forget that biology is the study of living things. So, which are called organisms. So, all organisms are, of course, alive because these are living things. So, this includes when we speak of when we speak of organisms, I mean, examples of this are bacteria, protists, fungi, plants, and animals. So these are all organisms. Now, can we classify virus as an organism?
Yes, ma'am.
Really? Are you sure?
Naman siya life.
Of course, not shy life because it belongs to the. That's why it's part of biology, but it's actually a what do you call a predator. No, but we will discuss more about virus on the last topics of this course. So the study of biology. So the study of life started from how the world was created. Now it is somewhat what do you call that, opposite to being religious. But as we base life based on biology, how do life started? Do you believe in the Big Bang theory or the religious ways?
Big Bang.
Sa Big Bang ka? Wala, you don't believe in God?
Muto, ma'am, pero dili ko muto kuan kanang mga statwa.
Creation. You don't believe in creation because it's biblical. So anyway, that's not the issue here. So this is what science explain us how life started. It is where it started from the Big Bang theory, wherein the world or Earth was formed, or even the universe was formed through a big explosion. So that's the Big Bang theory, and there was life. Then which is like 3.5 billion years ago. And the first organisms or living things were just single cell, meaning one cell. It's not like us. Humans are what? We are multicellular, made up of multicellular. Even plants are now made up of multicellular. So the single cell living things that remains until now are what?
Ito, ma'am?
Bacteria. Ang na the living things that only remains until now from the time of Big Bang Theory, or where the world was created, was the oldest things alive, living things alive are
Bacteria?
now are now bacteria, right?
Bacteria?
Because these are single celled. So, yun ang mga bacteria actually ang pinakamatandang buhay until now. So, only life on Earth for million of years. It's the only living organism, which has of course changed over time because we believe in evolution based on science, and each of us evolved. Like in science, um, human, humans, what's the scientific name for human beings?
Kalimot ko, ma'am.
Nakalimut po ko. Anyway, we will come to that. So, we came from the apes, right? From the monkeys. So that's what evolution tells about us. So the new organism arose from older kinds. Today there are millions of species already, and they inhabit almost every region of Earth today. So especially in our country, in a tropical country like Philippines, we are really rich in various floras and faunas, plants and animals, varieties. So themes of biology, we are all made up of cell, no structure, and each cell structure have its own function. we have we are stable because of this particular cell, and we have homeostasis. So it means that we have reaction and fluidity, and for we also are able to reproduce and inherit the genes that we had from, or even any organism will inherit the genes that they got from the mother cells. And we are capable of evolution, like like you. Most probably ikaw ang pinakagwapo kumpara sa imuhang mga lolo ug lola, right? So naunsa kung ikaw na lang ang pinakapangit, gwapo ra ka imuhang lolo ug lola, wala na mao ang evolution nimo, no? So kung tan-awon sa family tree, you must be more handsome compared to your ancestors, right? So that's evolution. And then we have interdependence of organisms. So we are all connected. We in an ecology, and we are all made up of matter, energy, and organization. So we let's talk about the cell structure and function. The basic unit of life is,
Cell.
of course, how daw eh. Hindi lang ta mag-discuss, ani, how naman ka. This is just a review anyway. So, and this is your PhD already, right?
Dili.
Panghabang buhay or pang 9 years na nimo in college. Joke lang ha, ayo ka offend, but so for the sake of your classmates that are that who's gonna watch this video, so let's explain this in detail. All organisms are made up of and develop from cells. That's why it's the basic unit of life. And some composed of a unicellular or single cell, or which is actually very identical to sorry to the parent. No, if especially kung cellular siya, most probably it's identical siya sa mother or sa parent cell. Unlike for multicellular, which will be explained more or less meron siyang genetic variation. So let's talk about cells. Most organisms are composed of many cells called multicellular, and they are different, which undergo differentiation, which later on we will also tackle on the different stages of uh, cell embryosis, yung mga phases of cell development. Then cells are small and are highly organized. That's why even for plants, not for bacteria because these are just unicellular, but for multicellular plants and even human beings and animals, like we have um, organs, right? Like the
So,
for plants we have the reproductive organ, and we also have reproductive organs for animals. So because that organ is mainly has a main function for reproduction, that's why it's a reproductive organ. So cells contain specialized structures called organelles that carry out the cell's life processes. So these organelles are mainly genetic. Many different kinds of cells also exist and are surrounded by plasma membrane. It contains set of instruction called as DNA, or what we called as the deoxyribonucleic acid. It's the genetic information. So each single cell in the body has its own genetic makeup. Like for this example, two different eyes, brown one and the blue eyes. So that's because they have different genetic makeups. Let's talk, let's talk about stability and homeostasis. So organism must maintain very stable internal conditions called homeostasis. So it's about balance. So we are mainly affected by temperature, water content, chemical content, and others, and must be maintained. Likewise, human beings are also also contain more or less 50% or more water, and even plants and animals. So one aspect of biology, or the study of living things, is also reproduction and inheritance. In fact, in our ancestors, what's more important to our culture is reproduction and inheritance, right? Like kung dili gani ka maminyo, dili ka magkaanak, mura gani dakong kawalan, but it's not about that anymore in this generation, thanks God. But sa una, padaghanay og anak, og dapat gani in other culture, 'di ba? Dapat lalaki gyud ang ilahang anak. Kay kung walay lalaki, mahurot na lang kabuntis imong mama para makapangita lang jud og lalaki nga anak. That's how culture was before. Dili pa man ka uminyo, no? Ulitaw pa ka?
dili ma'am.
Ah.
Yes, ma'am.
So, pila mo gusto na anak?
5.
Pag sure ha nga, makabuhi ka ha? So anyways, going back, all organisms produce new organisms like themselves reproduce. So that's how the nature of living things are. So organisms transmit hereditary information to their offspring. We called it as inheritance. So munang naay ginatawag na in Bisaya kaliwat, no? So gwapo nga kaliwat or isog na kaliwat, may anak kaliwat og kulot og utok, whatever. So talk about DNA, it's the genetic information in all cells known as the deoxyribonucleic acid. Dapat memorize na nimo ha. And DNA contains this genes, the instruction for the trait. It is the one that makes up your physical beauty, your and even your intelligence and even your emotional and psychological, no, social and so on. And make the structures and complex chemicals necessary for life or proteins. So later we will also discuss how do cells do this? How does genetic makeup process? So DNA in every body cell is called somatic cells. Is exactly alike. So lahat yan, all DNA are just the same per individual. So another is sexual reproduction. Hereditary information from two different organisms of the same species are combined. So this is now the complexity for animals because plant kingdom have different sexual reproduction, no? Although it's somewhat the same, but there are various differences between animals and plants. So we say sexual reproduction if there are two different organisms combined as one. So we call it the egg and sperm, and the fertilized egg we call it zygote. So of course you know already how it goes, right? For humans and even animals. You already have your animal science subjects, right?
Yeah.
And the zygote, because you're already graduating, no? Zygote contains hereditary information from both parents. So that's the fertilized egg. So we also have the asexual reproduction, no? For human beings, we cannot have one, although with technology today that there are already test tube babies, but somehow it's still restricted in some religious points. But it is still, asexual is still done using sperm and egg cells. But for animals, it could be possible that the same parent can have asexual reproduction, and generally for plants, it's very possible. Hereditary information from one, usually unicellular organism that divides and resulting cells contain identical hereditary information. So um, this means that they, if it's a sexual reproduction, usually the genes that made up of that is very identical, pareho lang. That's why for plants, for example, if you're gonna plant the cuttings, that's a sexual reproduction, right? So the mother plant and the fruit and the flower of the cutting is exactly the same with the attributes of the mother plants. It's just because they have identical hereditary information because they usually came from one unicellular organisms that divides, and the genetic information from single parent. So another topic that is embodied in biology is evolution. How do living things evolve? So population of our organisms change, which evolve means change over generation or time. And this is affected by our environment, no? Or genetic through the years, as we like if you have different ancestors like makaasawa ka puhon o nana ba kayo uyab
Wala.
pag sure kailan dagwaya na. So if makauyab kag foreigner for sa Brazilian for instance or American, so your sibling not siblings, your children will have different or mixed makeup, genetic makeup already. So that could be the source of evolution, no? Like us, we have been, Philippines have been colonized by the Spaniards for 300 years, and even Japanese and Americans too. So there's, we can't say that this is actually our pure genetic makeup Filipinos already, because we have been colonized and perhaps been hybridized by, let's say, Spanish or Americans or Japanese or Chinese even, and explains how many different kinds of organism came into existence species. So this will also explain the different existence of species and explains how modern organisms are related to past organisms. So that's evolution. It's also explain why organisms look and behave the way they do, no? And it provides a basis for exploring the relationship among different groups of organisms. Like for, they say that like this mammals, I not know, this like ang butiki daw, nag-evolve ra daw na siya, no? And like kaning mga crocodile, nag-evolve ra na sila, gikan daw na sila sa butiki. So there are things like that. So natural selection is another aspect of biological life. Natural selection is the driving force in evolution. So right now we're having a pandemic, and simply it's also some sort of natural selection, no? Organisms that have certain favorable traits are better able to successfully reproduce than organisms that lack these traits. So, matirang matibay, no? Survival of the fittest, that's natural selection. So, survival of organisms with favorable traits caused gradual change in population over many generations. So, now that we have pandemics, so those healthiest people will really survive, no, not to be infected with this disease. And other than that, also temperature. If you notice, the temperature now is getting high and high. So those who are very sensitive, I'm talking about organisms that very sensitive to high temperature may become extinct, no? They are gone. So as I have said earlier, it's called survival of the fittest. So we also have the interdependence of organism. It means the interaction of organism with one another and with their environment and ecology. So sometimes we always depends on plants and animals. Human beings, the highest order of kingdom, always depends on for food on plants and animals. That's why we have to take care in response to our mother nature. Like for example, insects depend and flowers depend on each other for food and pollination, and also for coevolution. All organisms need substances such as nutrients, water, and gases from the environment. Like for the process of photosynthesis, that's how plants make food. They bear fruit and they flower because of photosynthesis, and they need oxygen, and that the oxygen was being excreted by animals. And in return, I mean the carbon dioxide, they need carbon dioxide, and in return, plants give off oxygen, and we need oxygen to live, right? Kung di ka makaginhawa, patay ka. So the stability of the environment depends on the healthy functioning of organisms in that environment. So let's talk about matter, energy, and organization. So which is still part of living things. Because we are highly organized, we require a constant supply of energy to maintain orderly state. So We eat food for us to move, do our activities, metabolic activities, through supply of energy. So what is energy? We have all energy comes from the sun, but the directly or indirectly. So, but the energy that we get is through the plants and animals. And plants take energy from the sun. So they do this through the process of, as I have said, photosynthesis. It is a process which some organisms capture the energy from the sun or solar and transform it into chemical energy and used by living things like us, even animals. So this is just the general equation that you should always remember. The carbon dioxide with water in the presence of sunlight, plants are able to transform this using in the chlorophyll as green pigment into sugar and oxygen. So we need the sugar as source of energy, and we breathe in oxygen to provide our systems with oxygen. Otherwise, without oxygen, we cannot breathe. And also, that's why in the ocean, now when we go swimming, we lack oxygen, then we die drowning. So fish are also exemptional because they are able to breathe inside or down the water. So in relation to the the different um, photosynthetic characteristic of plants, there are what we call autotrophs. These are organisms that make their own food, which are called autotrophs. So plants generally are autotrophs. There are also called phototrophs, use solar energy or photosynthesis to get energy. And another one is convert water and carbon dioxide into sugar and oxygen. And there are also chemotrophs, which uses different chemical process to get energy. So it's just about autotrophs, phototrophs, and chemotrophs. While another one is heterotrophs, the organism that must take in food to meet their energy needs, and we are called heterotrophs, but classified as herbivores if we consume autotrophs, no, or the plants, or heterotrophs if we consume if we consume meat, called carnivores, or omnivores if we both consume plants and animals for energy needs. So complex chemicals are also broken down and reassembled into chemicals and structure needed by organisms. Okay, let me go back to you. I don't know kung kinsa nay wala man. So, let's go back to the slide. Next is the world of biology, living things, and so on. As a review, all organisms can be made of single cell or many cells called multicellular. So that's all for the introduction to biology. So that is just a review on what we are going to talk about on the biology part. So do you have any question before we proceed to another one?
Wala, ma'am.
Are you sure?
So, paano lang next?
So our next topic will be about characteristic of life. which is 37 slides, but we can talk about it later or next meeting. So, in general, in this first chapter that I have shown you, do you have any some more interest that you want to be specific with? Kasi ito more on, maybe you have known all of this, or there are things that you just need to remember. So, but then we have to review this one before we proceed to the next. So, do you have any concerns regarding biology?
Katong sa kuan ma'am, katong sa Heterotrophs.
Mm-hmm. What about
Asa to?
autotroph?
Tanaw ra to balik ma'am.
Mm, this one. Yes.
Ay ang ganang Heterotrophs ma'am bilong na siya sa kuan, Heterotrophs o lahi lahi pa na siya.
There are, well, phototrophs can also be autotrophs like the plants, no? Kasi phototrophs definitely are plants, but autotrophs can make their own food, no? And take note that, and definitely autotrophs are phototrophs, because phototrophs are autotrophs, baliktad pala. Kasi phototrophs use photosynthesis to get energy, and they are usually making their own energy or food. But there are also autotrophs that belongs to like the green algae. These are not plants. Autotrophs are all plants, and there are also bacteria which are autotrophs. They can make their own food without being phototrophs. These are also called as chemotrophs. They use a chemical process to get energy. So although like the algae and some bacteria, they may or may not use solar or photosynthesis to make their own food. So autotrophs are just general term for those organisms who can make their own food. But when you say you use the sun, that's the only plants can use the sun for photosynthesis. So that's why they are called phototrophs. But for some bacteria who uses chemicals, these are called chemotrophs. So all in all, they are autotrophs. But for animals, most of the animals are heterotrophs, because we cannot make our own food. Even the livestock and all the wild animals, they cannot make their own food. So the heterotrophs can be herbivores, or those animals who eat plants, carnivores who eat meats, and omnivores who eat both plants and animals. So like the insects are herbivores or carnivores?
Angon sa ma'am?
Insects. Let's say butterfly. Herbivore.
Herbivores.
Yeah, but we cannot say definitely, because there are also plants, even plants, there are carnivore plants like the pitcher plant. Have you seen the pitcher plant? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
They eat insects, right? Not really eat, but they just catch the insects and and process them chemically. So what are your other concerns regarding the things that we discussed and we will discuss in the future?
Kato lang ma'am.
Ito lang. So, do you still want to discuss another topic, or we leave it the next meeting? We still have a lot of time anyway.
Next meeting lang guro ma'am.
Yes.
Na sila.
Yes, we can
Kung
have a
dili
break.
kayo layo ilang apason,
Char. Maka, they
ganaw
can.
sila ba?
So, thank you very much for your attendance, and I hope you've learned a lot in this in this topic, which is very general, and we will be discussing anyway one by one each of this kasi introduction pa lang ito. So, this is just to introduce what is inside the biology, no? The study of life. So if wala ka ng tanong, if you don't have any more question, then I will see you again next meeting. But I don't know if still the same time. So John Ray could still join the meeting, the class. So we will just set that. So for now, thank you for your attendance.